the use of my email account was turned into, the biggest scandal since Lord knows when. They covered it like it was Pearl Harbor. This was the biggest nothing burger ever. I inherit nothing from the Democratic Party. Comey was more than happy to talk about my emails, but he wouldn't talk about investigation of the Russians. I also think I was the victim of a very broad assumption I was going to win. There's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
I was the victim. You could sum it up in that phrase. That was Hillary Clinton, of course, last May, laying blame everywhere except with herself for her defeat in 2016. Now her book-length take on that campaign, which is called What Happened, is about to come out. Has she changed her thinking? Apparently not. Mrs. Clinton takes some responsibility for her defeat, apparently, but later falls back on blaming, of course, you know what it is, sexism, for her unpopularity. Quote, "What makes me such a lightning rod for fury? I'm really asking. I'm at a loss," Clinton writes. "I think it's partly because I'm a woman." Mark Stein has written many books that do not involve blaming others for his problems. He joins us tonight. Do you feel that people discriminate against you because you're a man?
I blame you, Tucker, because as far as I can see, you're about the only person that Hillary Clinton hasn't blamed. I don't know how. I mean, this is extraordinary to me. It is as if every hurricane, from Hurricane A to Hurricane Z, including Hurricane Bernie, Hurricane Biden, all the way to Hurricane Macedonia, Hurricane Sexism, have all just gathered to rain continuously on Hillary for 2 years. And it's extraordinary to me that the Democrats have not actually had a quiet word with her and say, look, I know you need a new book or something, but why don't you just do, Hillary Clinton tips on being a grandmother, Hillary Clinton cookbook. Anything would be better than just revisiting. I mean, it must be the only people it's good for. As you say, she blamed the Macedonian content farmers, and it must be good for Macedonian tourism, like New Zealand after Lord of the Rings came out. There must be people booking vacations in Macedonia right now saying, I gotta see it. It's a pilgrimage to the people who took out the most inevitable presidential candidate in history. I gotta see what it is. And if I can't afford, if Macedonia is fully booked, I'll go up to Burlington, Vermont and see Bernie Sanders.
Well, but have you ever, I mean, look, she wasn't going to write Deep Thoughts by Hillary Clinton, the shortest book ever written. But have you noticed how the most entitled people often see themselves as victims? I mean, this is someone for who obviously didn't become the nominee on the strength of her own achievements, which were, I don't know, what? Wrecking Syria, wrecking Libya. I don't understand why she sees herself as put upon when I think objectively she's just the opposite.
No, and I think that's why people did not warm to her, because she was the entitled candidate. She felt she was owed it for having suffered through being married to Bill Clinton and being in the White House for Bill Clinton. I don't think people were sexist about her, and I don't think people anywhere in the developed world. I sat through Prime Minister's questions in the Australian Parliament a couple of years ago when the female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, was being hammered by the deputy leader of the opposition, Julie Bishop, now the Foreign Minister. They were going at it hammer and tongs. They were both women who'd reached the summit of their respective parties on their own merits. What nobody liked about Hillary Clinton was that she was not an obvious candidate, except in the sense that she felt she was entitled to be the candidate.
Right. That it was a hereditary deal. I wonder going forward if you see Hillary Clinton as the standard bearer for the Democratic Party 10 years from now. I mean, is there Hillaryism? Does anything about her endure as part of the Democratic Party?
No, I think quite the opposite. And actually, that's where the attack on Bernie Sanders is not going to work for her. Whatever you feel about it, the Democrats are trending in a Bernie-like direction.
Exactly.
That's where the enthusiasm is. And I think there's absolutely no doubt in that respect that the party is moving left. And Hillary has no ideological or philosophical worldview that's going to outlast her candidacy. That was true from the rapidity of her campaign, whatever you feel about Bernie Sanders, and she says, she calls him now, you know, the Bernie, the one who's promising everybody a free pony. Whatever you feel about that is Bernie Sanders is where the Democrats are headed, and they will barely remember the Hillary candidacy.
That is a deep point. That's exactly right, and I want my pony. Mark, thank you, as always.
Thanks. Saddle up, Tucker.
Saddle up. Giddy up.
One, what is going to happen with DACA? And we know we're waiting on that. And I ask you in a different context than normal. One of the things we're seeing coming out of Harvey is they are not checking for documentation right now because the exigency is on safety and just making sure as many people get as help as possible. We have not heard the president criticize that move, that leniency right now. And I'm wondering if that plays in to any of his philosophy about what to do with DACA, because these kids who then become adults in this country are a very vulnerable group. What's the thinking on it?
Well, a few things on DACA. The Congress had all year to act. A legislative fix or some clarity would be helpful. But on the matter of DACA, the president has expressed sympathy for many of the so-called dreamers, what they refer to themselves as dreamers. And he's also made very clear that he wants an immigration system that respects the law and that is fair to everyone involved. And let me just back up, because I think that Donald Trump, as a candidate and now as president, took issues that really were mired in the low single digits in everybody's polling. Illegal immigration, trade, for example, and he talks about them through the lens of fairness, but fairness to all. So for years, the big debate was, what's fair to the illegal immigrant? What more can we do for them or give to them? And Donald Trump said as a candidate, well, but what's fair to the American worker with whom they're competing for that particular job? What's
but the data disputes that premise, by the way.
No, Chris, come on.
They're just not the jobs. They're just not the jobs that Americans are looking for and doing. That's not what undocumented people are doing.
Excuse me. By the way, that is a very elite, effete argument.
No, it isn't. How many people do you know that want jobs picking vegetables and cleaning homes?
By the way, many, because I grew up in the part of New Jersey. Excuse me. I grew up in the part of New Jersey. You walked right into that one, because I actually walked. I grew up in the part of New Jersey that gives it the nickname the Garden State, and worked on a farm myself for 8 summers. There are many Americans who will do what immigrants and American-born citizens have done for years.
Those aren't the jobs that the working class needs.
Do what they have to do to support themselves and their families. But
undocumented immigrants aren't what's keeping wages down. They're not what's taking the good jobs away from American workers. There's a reason that Mar-a-Lago has to go outside the country to get service workers. You know, there's a demand for that kind of labor, right or wrong. It's existed for a long time. So the question becomes, how do you balance respect for the law and enforcement of that law? And you have two very different opinions. You had Trump during the campaign who said, we're going to be a hammer, we're going to be a hammer, we're going to get them all out. Then once he learned more about these people and how they manifest themselves in this country, especially the dreamers, he said, this is really hard. I got to figure it out. They should rest easy. And I'm wondering where his head is now.
Well, that's what leaders do, though. Leaders listen to many different insights and inputs and contrasting opinions. The president surrounds himself with people of that nature. But at the same time, I want to remind you, he has never backed down from the fact that this is a country, it's a nation, it's a sovereign nation that must have borders that are respected, and that we have spent billions of dollars over the years helping other nations protect their own borders, and many Americans agree with him that it's high time we respect our own. I would mention a couple other things, though. This president's very committed to workforce development and labor overall. He, about 2 months ago, invested $100 million and directed his Secretary of Labor and others, and is working with governors. I sat in one meeting with Democratic and Republican governors and members of the cabinet where they talked about workforce development. They talked about what are the needs the job creators came here to, what are the needs of our modern economy, what is it that what are the skill sets and the tools that are necessary, and we're listening to that. And this apprenticeship program that he has put his full force in effect behind, as has Ivanka Trump in her capacity here as senior advisor, it's incredibly heartening because the folks that you grow, some of the folks you grew up with in Queens, I grew up with in South Jersey, these are folks who don't go to college but who can graduate from high school or a community college with a skills certificate, and they can become carpenters, welders, plumbers. They are a very vital, important part of our economy, Chris, and they can support themselves and their families on day one.
The trades are real. There's no question about it. They need encouragement just the way college does. And it also makes the point about what kinds of jobs are really needed and what the real threat of these new immigrants are. We're out of time. Kellyanne, I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
There's always
very
the
much.
sequel for you and me. Thanks, Chris.
Good to know. You're
Take
always
care.
welcome here to talk about
Thank
what
you,
matters.
sir.
Be well and stay safe.
God bless.
All right. So look, that is the political back and forth of this. You can judge the tactics for yourself, but the substance matters. That's a senior counselor to the President of the United States. What Kellyanne argues is what the President believes.